excited to be speaking with you. I am a new but a very big fan of yours. My family loves your recipes, and I'm so excited for the Allsorts community to learn more about you and your work.
Thank you so much for having me here and chatting with me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Let's get started. I love asking plant-based and vegan creators about their sort of vegan origin story because I think a lot of this community is sort of plant curious and not necessarily fully on that journey yet. And so I feel like it's so helpful to hear from other people and learn their stories and how they came to eat this way. So we were just talking before the recording that you've been vegan for 16 years.
Yes. And as I mentioned then, I don't know where the time has gone. How is that? How is that real? I don't understand it. But I started very slowly and very gradually over a long period of time. And for me, I didn't even think about it as something that was about perfection. I always just strived to continue toward this goal of mine. And I feel like it worked out because it set me up at a pace that allowed me to be successful and to feel good instead of maybe taking a misstep and feeling overwhelmed and in shame about I didn't do a vegan thing. So it worked out for me, and I have now been vegan for 16 years. And originally it was just red meat. I started because a concerned coach of mine was wondering why I was getting sick. And I didn't even realize at that moment in my life that what I ate would impact how I felt. I just thought it was about taste and getting my belly full. And I was eating a lot of fast food and a lot of processed food. So it impacted me negatively. So that was the whole introduction, the genesis of my story. It was red meat and fast food. And he just said, you need to chill out on those things.
And I feel like this sort of sentiment or topic has really been in the air this week because I also took a very slow approach. Like I went vegetarian as a teenager and then I went fully vegan in my mid 30s. And I think we have such an all or nothing, like very just like you're all in, like go big or go home attitude to like pretty much everything in our culture. And I think that people forget that it's okay to wade in, right? Like to take those steps and like, oh, maybe it's red meat now. And maybe I'm going to learn how to like make my spaghetti bolognese without the ground beef now. And like once that feels good and cozy, you can be like, oh, what's next? And like it should feel like a generative process, like you're exploring new foods and it's exciting and you feel good in your body because you're like feeding yourself nourishing foods. Like it doesn't have to be like I'm going to put all this pressure on myself and tomorrow do everything and then 3 days from now be at a party and you're like none of this is vegan, I'm going to eat this and be like, oh, I messed up and I guess I can't do this.
Exactly. And I also feel like it's a big mindset shift. It's not only deciding which path you're taking, but also being open to trying new things that are outside of your comfort zone. And for me, being plant-based, being vegetarian, eating less red meat, all along the way has been the very opposite of restrictive. It has opened up a whole new world of flavors and international cuisines that I was totally uncomfortable with or I didn't even know existed, and types of produce. I had a very limited palate, and deciding to step out of my comfort zone at a pace that just felt good to me really transformed the way I eat and the way I think about food in general.
Yeah. And and it can be sort of that like meal by meal, like someone can go to plant-based on a budget and be like, okay, I want to figure out a cool tofu recipe now to put on my plate where that piece of meat was. And it can actually be that simple.
Exactly. And in fact, I have surveyed my audience, and 65% of people who are part of my community eat meat, but are trying to incorporate more plant-based dishes into their lives and into their families' lives. They realize that it is going to be better for their digestion and their long-term health and want that for their families.
That is so, so cool. Like, especially what you said too about like broadening your horizons. Whenever I hear someone say, oh, well, that's like restrictive to be vegan, I'm like, but there's only like 4 things we don't eat. And in the like not eating those 4 things, you probably add 30 things into your life. Like it is such an abundant, fun, and flavorful way to eat.
And and back to my old self, I remember the very first time I went to a vegetarian restaurant. I was already toying with eating less meat, but I still was uncomfortable trying new things. And my friend said, order anything you want. It was a Vietnamese vegetarian restaurant. And I was so overwhelmed that all I ordered was white rice because I just didn't have it in me yet at that time to try something new. And now I love Vietnamese food. And it actually, that restaurant, it's called Andy Nguyen's. It's one of my favorite restaurants in Sacramento where I live. And it's a staple, but I understand how it can be a little bit intimidating because I had never had kale. I had never had brown rice. I had never had a butternut squash or a sweet potato or these things that are staples in the plant-based lifestyle. And so I totally understand how it can feel overwhelming, but if you step out of your comfort zone and give things a try, not once, not twice, not 3 times, maybe 10 times, like that's how long it took me to love brown rice. And those who are parents, I am not, but I hear this all the time. That's how you have to introduce new foods to children too. It may not be the first time, but you just keep trying and introducing it in different ways, and they could love it.
Yeah, I have 2 kids, and I'm definitely not a child feeding expert. I feel like sort of the opposite. I can never take the parent hat off and like just put the dietitian hat on, but it's so true when things are new, and especially when we've had sort of like a limited palate to start with. Another trick that works, one is just keep trying it, but try something in a familiar form. So if you
Mm-hmm.
love lasagna and you have never had butternut squash, well, you put that butternut squash in the lasagna. And then because it's something you love, your body's more like, oh, hey, this is familiar. This is cozy. I think I can get with this.
That's exactly how I feel too about doing simple swaps with meat. I think when you're moving toward more plant-based dishes, sometimes you feel like you have to reinvent the wheel when in reality you can eat a lot of the same foods that you are familiar with, that your family loves the flavors and textures of, but make a simple swap. And one thing that my family super loves are tacos. And instead of ground beef, I use lentils, and I use all of the same flavors. I use all the same toppings. And when you're eating it, it provides that same experience that you know and are familiar with and appreciate. And then you don't miss the beef.
Yeah, I love that. What was your food life like growing up? Like what sort of like family meals did you have around the dinner table before you went
I
plant-based?
I had an interesting experience because I have basically 2 parts of my childhood. I had part one from when I was born to when I was 11, and I lived with my grandparents. They were both retired, and my dad was in the Navy. He was a teenager when I was born, so he immediately went to the Navy, and I lived with my grandparents. At that time, I had full time attention. I was an only child to them. And my grandpa was a big time gardener. It's very common here in the Central Valley of California to, uh, if you're Japanese, to have that had to have had that as part of your life. So my grandpa was very familiar with gardening, and then my grandma, who also, as a Mexican woman, had picking produce in her past as well. So I had access and familiarity with fresh produce and delicious meals. But then my dad came home from the Navy when I was 11, and we lived the bachelor life together and ate a lot of processed food. And he did the best job raising me. I'm not knocking him, but he was also a single father who worked full time and brought me along to work. And so uh, it it lent processed, easy, fast food lent itself well to someone who didn't have time or energy to think about food. So I have taken that experience and made that type of family the primary motivation for my work, to make things that are quick and easy and also healthy, accessible, affordable, so that I can help alleviate some of the long-term stresses that come with eating a more processed diet.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. So interesting. So I was raised by a single mom who, same thing, didn't have a lot of time. And I started cooking at the age of 13 because she would come home super, super tired and I would be totally teenage and impatient. And I'd be like, I'm hungry. And she's like, well, maybe you should cook dinner. And like at the age of 13. So it was like pierogies and nachos and like very, very simple things. But that's totally how I started cooking.
Yes, and I appreciate it now. Like I'm able to have a better understanding of what the reality is for so many people, and it helps me be more compassionate and patient and meet people where they are, because I started from a similar position.
Yeah. And you've built this incredible world and you have this amazing like you have 4 books, 2 blogs, which absolutely, as someone who also has a blog, blows me away, and a podcast. And I think that people might not realize that you really started Plant-Based on a budget out of necessity. Like, can you share what led to the creation of that first website?
Thank you for the kind words, by the way. I started the website initially because my family was my primary motivator. They had suffered from a lot of diet related health issues, and I mean, big time suffered, very serious consequences. My aunt, my dad's sister, she had type 2 diabetes and had multiple amputations, and then it ultimately claimed her life. My grandpa, I mentioned, who helped raise me, he had a heart attack, but later on, when I was a teenager, died in triple bypass surgery due to complications. And my 40-year-old uncle had a heart attack, and it was just very up close and personal to me, the negative impacts that come later in life when you feel sentenced to poor health due to finances. And so I I had already become plant-based. I wanted to share that with my family, but I kept on hearing a lot of pushback about the accessibility, about the affordability, and the relatability even. And so I took those concepts, I started Plant-Based on a budget, and I tried as hard as I could to share. I still do, and they have made some progress. It's been 11 years since I started Plant-Based on a budget, but it's slow, and I appreciate every single step. A big one that is the most important to me, the biggest thing that I could never have imagined is that my parents no longer eat chorizo. They only eat soy chorizo. And it sounds so small, but they love chorizo. It's a big staple in Mexican food. So I celebrate it. I celebrate every small step, and as though it's a big step, because I believe that is true.
Yeah. Well, food is so personal and our eating habits are so deeply held that that is a big step. Like making any change with any food or meal that is foundational to who you are as a person and your culture and your family, like that's a huge step. And I think we don't celebrate those kind of things enough. Like we're so deeply hard on ourselves all of the time. But when you can look back and be like, that is one of my favorite foods and I made this switch, like that's massive.
I agree. And I also feel like if you can take that same positivity and grace and self kindness and apply it, especially when you make a mistake, whether on purpose or by accident, you will be propelled to move further along in your journey. And if I found that if you instead make it a shameful experience, you're like, one is likely to say, I tried plant-based, it didn't work for me. I got a little bit, I drank a little bit too much, had a burger, and now I'm done with that. But instead, what we can do is say, I made a choice, and tomorrow I'm going to make a different choice, and it can continue to be moved further along and in line with your health goals, your financial goals, your family goals, because these are generational decisions. How you eat will impact how your children eat and how their children eat. And we want the best for our families. That is just how it goes.
Totally. Let's talk more about financial goals, because as a dietitian, I hear all the time from people, oh, well, healthy eating feels too expensive to me. And to me, you are like the queen of like, you can do this and you can do anything on a budget. So, what would you say to folks to sort of counter that assumption?
Well, for a long time, I thought I understood what people needed and wanted, and that was inexpensive recipes. But
Mm.
after maybe a few years into this journey of mine, I realized what people really needed were meal plans, uh, at least something that was going to guide them at the grocery store, because it can be a challenge to understand how to pair meals so that they have matching ingredients that you can use multiple times throughout the week, or that we're going to keep you within budget, or so that you weren't buying more than what your family needed and then having to toss it out. So I recommend, if you have it in you, to create meal plans for yourself. But I also have free meal plans with budget in mind on plantbasedonabudget.com. And with those, I was motivated originally by something called the SNAP Challenge. SNAP is the government assistance for food. And I remember first learning about the SNAP Challenge. I was very excited and felt like it was going to be a good resource, but then I felt like it became kind of gimmicky. There were a lot of people who were doing the SNAP Challenge who had a lot of money and would be, I remember seeing one picture of this lady with her cart filled with processed foods that were within the budget of the SNAP Challenge, and was like posing with it. And I just thought, oh, it's so insensitive to people who are long-term in financial struggle. So I took that budget and that concept, and I created what was called the Plant-Based on a Budget Challenge. It was the first big thing that I did with Plant-Based on a Budget. And it had thousands of people sign up. I said at that time, if I have $25 that can be stretched for your whole food budget for the week, would you take this challenge with me? And it was so fun and exciting. It was very stressful on my part to create a meal plan like that, but it helped people at least have the foundation. And if they had more money, they could add a lot of vegetables. But if they had very, very little money and wanted to learn how to use brown rice and whole beans and basic produce, this was going to be the guide. So that's what I have found the most passion in, and what I feel like is the most helpful, because it does take up a lot of brain space. And when you've got multiple jobs and children, or a single parent, or like the many obstacles that life throws at you, it's one less thing you have to think about.
Yeah. And I feel like there's always this sort of false dichotomy. People like, you either have lots of time or lots of money, but I'm like, lots of people don't have both. And when you have food knowledge, these things that we take for granted that we know, we're like, oh, okay, so I'm just going to make these lentils and they'll be like tacos tonight. And then I'll like put them in a wrap tomorrow for lunches. And you just sort of do that mental math in your head, but
Yep.
not everyone has those same skills.
Exactly. And lentils can be new. Like, how do you even cook lentils? What is that? Like, what do they taste like? So to have that groundwork laid out for you is beneficial in many ways.
Yeah. And particularly, I feel like all of us are feeling the crunch right now because groceries are starting to get last year there was a lot of inflation and it's happening again this year. I would love to pick your brain and wonder if you can share like 3 tips with our listeners to help them save money at the grocery store.
First, I recommend totally taking in the permission to be okay on a budget. I feel like there's some shame, and I remember feeling that. I have a very vivid memory of being a child, and my dad would hold up the line to get the sale price, and it was so embarrassing, and people are like tapping their foot behind you, but I would be like, Dad, please, and he'd be like, these people don't pay my bills, therefore I don't care about their opinions. And I feel like if everybody can channel their George Okamoto and like not care about the person tapping their foot because you're doing what you need to do for your family to save that dollar, then power to you. Buying only what you need if you are on a tight budget and not feeling like you need to have a lot. I've been in that place where it feels good to have a refrigerator full of vegetables. But if I'm not planning on using those vegetables, it doesn't feel good when I'm throwing them in the garbage and like tossing money in the trash can. And so I think a lot of the initial steps toward being smarter with your money at the grocery store is in your brain, and just giving yourself space and permission to be on a budget, to be budget conscious, to use your coupons. I download the apps on my phone, and thankfully it is so much easier now than ever to use coupons, because when my mom used to pull up at the grocery store with her accordion folder of like organized coupons, that was also embarrassing. But now all you have to do is pull up your app, there's a barcode, and scan it.
And so do you use like coupon apps, or do you use like the supermarket's apps for coupons?
All of the things. The nearest grocery store to me has an app, that's Sprouts. And I know what I want to buy at Sprouts, and I know what I want to buy at Winco, which is another big giant grocery store. It's like a warehouse grocery store, and they have bulk items that I usually stock up on once a month. And then I get my produce as needed from Sprouts that's near my house. And so I stay on top of this is a little bit nerdy. You don't have to do this. I don't want to make it seem more complicated, but I do stay on top of what's on sale there with their ads that come through the mail. And a lot of people just toss those, but you can find out what's on sale. And it's free. It comes to your house. If you're on the toilet or like at breakfast, you can take a look through. And so I download their app, but then I also have some rebate apps, which some of them are even connected to store apps. So you don't even have to do any additional work. If you have signed up for those rebate apps, it'll take an additional 50 cents or $1 off. And the big thing you want to keep in mind is that you don't want to buy something just because it's on sale or just because you have a coupon. I think that that's the trap that you can fall into. You'd be like, oh, I do love that, I'll buy that. And instead, there are things like if you buy 3 bananas, you get 50 cents off or something like that. Some produce. I love those. And they're surprisingly often. So try not to fall into the trap and only buy what you need still, but there are a lot of ways. And you can also sign up for the grocery store emails. Those are good places, and often they'll have their own coupon codes. So if you spend $50, you'll save $3 off or something like that. And if you have a family, you're probably going to spend $50, and that $3 you can get something else that maybe a splurge item or just more of what you need. So for that, I recommend starting. I have like 100 emails. I have my house related emails. I have my coupon emails that I sign up for those. And that way it doesn't spam your inbox.
Yeah. That's a really good tip, because I have sort of like my work email and then I have my personal emails, but there are so many emails because I do all of my sale emails and like all of those kind of like retail emails. But then also there's like parent advisory committee emails in there that I like totally miss because I'm like, trying to scroll through.
Yep. That happens. And I learned that actually when I was planning my wedding. I didn't want to be on a lot of wedding email chain, like email when you subscribe to a lot of wedding emails. So I started my wedding one, and I thought, well, this is genius. I need to start one for my house and one for my dog and one for my work, and like all of the things have their own separate emails, and it keeps it organized for me.
It's like a virtual filing system, but just via email.
Yeah. See, I learned that from my mom with her accordion folder, all the broken down coupons.
I love it. Okay, so we definitely want to lean on meal plans. We want to lean on meal plans that utilize the same foods throughout the week, so we're not buying a ton of different foods at the grocery store. And then we want to make sure that we pay attention to the grocery store emails, get the apps, use the coupons so that you know what's on sale so that you can slot that into your meal plan.
Exactly. And then at the grocery store, it's a totally different experience too. Like you have to be super present and aware of your meal plan and grocery shopping list that you bring, but also try not to be distracted by the beautiful colors and the marketing tactics and the big sale prices, because that's how they get you. A lot of that is paid placement too. And people don't know that when you come in and you see the big yellow sale sign for tomato sauce and you need tomato sauce, that's maybe not the cheapest tomato sauce. That's paid placement tomato sauce. So if you go into the section, make sure you look around, try not to get too distracted, look for price per ounce, stay focused when you're being rung up, especially if you're buying bulk. Make sure you wrote down the right things by watching them ring you up on the screen. And it can be a lot in the first few times, but now I just walk to the grocery store. I'm like, nope, don't need that, and I stay the course.
I love it. And so as a dietitian, I feel like I have to put in this essential tip, which is don't go to the grocery store hungry, because the more you are trying to stay focused in the grocery shop, if you're like, I'll just go before dinner, no big deal, and you are starving all of the bright, shiny colors, they will lure you in.
That is so true. And I will say, I said I'll stay the course. That's my weakness, is if I have not eaten, it might not be as easy. And that's another thing about being more prepared with your food. I learned this because everyone in my life will be very upset with me if I don't eat, because I get really cranky and hangry. And I travel with snacks because I have a very high metabolism, and it happens so quickly. I can eat something and then not too long, I feel like I'm good, but the hunger happens and then the crankiness happens, and everybody is much happier when I have my snacks. So that's another thing about meal planning.
I love that. I don't think I'm always conscious of the fact that I get very cranky if I'm underfed, but I'm pretty sure that I do as well.
I do feel like a baby. Like my needs are so minimal. If I have sleep and food and comfort, I'm a happy camper. But when I don't have those things, I am a crying mess.
I love that. So let's talk about your new book, which is Plant-Based on a Budget, Quick and Easy, because meal planning is really sort of like a central tenet of this book to help you save not just money, but also time in the kitchen. And I know that not all of us are, amenable to meal planning. We might even be a little resistant to meal planning. So in addition to helping you save money, like what are some of the other benefits of meal planning that we should get on board with?
First, I'd like to mention that meal planning can look different to everybody. It can mean having a pot of rice to help you out throughout the week. It could mean having freezer-friendly meals packed away so that when you're hungry, you don't have to worry about it. It can mean so many different things. It doesn't have to mean you have a color-coded spreadsheet and everything is really strict and this is what we're doing and when we're doing it. So there's something for everybody. And the type that I like the most is having something like a loose plan so that when I'm in the thick of the work week, feeling super tired, I have something to at least fall back on. In my meal planning, I like to have some frozen vegetables that are already washed and chopped and stored in the freezer. I like to have some cans of beans available just in case I want to throw together a burrito. I like to have some hummus in case I want to have a wrap. Or I have in Plant-Based on a Budget Quick and Easy cookbook, I have a hummus pizza that I really like because I can buy a store-bought crust and slap on some just bake the crust, slap on some hummus, and then throw on some raw veggies. Like I like to do spinach and cucumbers and tomatoes, and you can put some baked tofu that is straight out of the package and flavored. And you have a quick meal that is healthy and nourishing and also is going to fill you up. So that's the type of meal planning that I tend to do. But in the book, I also have the various ways in case that's your jam.
I think that many of us see those creators who have like all of their little like bento boxes of meals laid out for the week, and that feels really intimidating. So I'm very glad that you said that. For me, as you know, someone who is the cook for our family, I tend to do more of what you described, whereas I will make a huge batch of chickpeas and then I will get those into the freezer so that I know that I have those chickpeas ready for the week. Or if I'm going to make a chili, I'll make a double batch so that we also have either a freezer meal for a week where things go off the rails, or that we can have lunches for the rest of the week. So I'm more of an overcooker or prepping the long prep stuff as opposed to, here is what we're eating, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like getting most of that made on a Sunday.
I mentioned this in the book, but I have a mix and match bowls chapter, and that's the style I do too, where I just have a sauce, a protein, a grain, and a vegetable. And what that looks like can be very different from the day before or the day after, but it's so easy once you get into it and you have those things like chickpeas on hand or some rice, which you can also freeze. And so yes, that's my style. And another thing that is really cool and what has kept me the most inspired about being vegan. When I was 20, I didn't have any friends who were vegetarians, and I was a vegetarianish. And I met people at my college campus who were in a veg club. I joined the veg club and had a community of people to support me. And whether that's one person in your life, whether that's a person you follow on social media or a Facebook group, it can look different in so many ways. But one is if you have a neighbor or a coworker and you could swap meals, that's another thing that's really exciting. If you take a recipe and both decide on what you want to double batch and then swap it so you're not having to put in all of the labor, but you're getting more diversity. I love that because food sharing is my love language, and I also am a lazy cook, so it's like the perfect thing.
I love that idea. That would be so awesome and when I think about it, if people are not feeling well or if they have a new baby, oftentimes people will sort of like, okay, so like I got like Monday dinner, you get Tuesday dinner. But I love the idea that you could just do that with your friends.
Yep.
And be like, okay, the three of us are each going to make like a big batch of something, and then we're going to share. And then you have all of these meals for the week, and you really just made one thing, which is like genius.
Yep. One other thing that we didn't chat about that is a very popular style of meal prepping, but I also feel like it can be boring, is making one pot of food, like one big pot of something, or making the lasagna or a big pasta dish, and then eating that throughout the week. But something that I have tried to do so that I'm not burned out on food that I love is create something that's really plain on the first day and then switch it up throughout the week. So if that's a soup, you can start it off with a clear broth, and the next day you can take a ladle or two in your bowl and then put in some hot sauce or some chopped jalapenos or some lemon juice and make a totally different flavor experience. Maybe you can add in some spinach before you reheat it on the stove, and it's different. So you can just take the same base and every day add a different taste and texture so that it doesn't feel like this is boring and now I hate soup.
And some people, I feel that it's so personality dependent too, because some people are like, absolutely, I will make one thing on Sunday and I'm just going to eat it all week. And that's fine for me. And I'll switch it up next week. Whereas other people are like, no, I need to change it up all the time. And so you need more of those flexible components. I feel like it's really about being honest with yourself too. I think in the process of meal planning and even eating, we sort of plan for this idealized version of ourselves. And then when we get to it on the day, we're like, no, I'm my real self today. And this is not working for me. And
Yeah.
if you really think about like, what do I love? Like what makes me interested about eating? What flavors do I love? What textures do I love? You can sort of like plan for that and make that meal plan your own.
Exactly. And then one other thing to add on top of that about being honest with yourself and knowing yourself really well is I really love, even when I'm on a super tight budget, to give myself a splurge item that may be a higher ticket price, like a priced high, a product that's priced higher, but it's going to save me when I'm having a craving for something later in the week. So it could be a pint of vegan ice cream or something like that I just know it's going to make me happy. And if I don't get it, I could just go to the ice cream store and spend that same amount on one scoop instead of a pint or something like that. So knowing myself, knowing what I want and not depriving myself of what I want has been really helpful, even at times when I was trying to save money.
And you made such an important point too. I think when we're at the grocery store, depending on what our budget is, there's often a sticker shock for higher priced items at the grocery store, but we're not thinking about, well, if we get a craving and then we go out, for example, that it would be so much more. So instead of buying, maybe like a fancy veggie burger or the vegan ice cream, which maybe is $7 or $8, but if you went out for it, you're like, I really want to treat myself to some ice cream, that scoop is going to be $5 all on its own. So for just $2 more, you'll have like 3 or 4 servings as opposed to just getting a single serving.
Yep, you can feed your family of 4 instead of getting your single serving at the ice cream shop.
Yeah, I feel like I probably fall victim to that a little bit at the grocery store, being like, oh, that's a lot. And then we will absolutely go out and our family of 4 will go out for coffees.
Yeah, I do too. That's how I worked it in, because I made that decision a lot of times at the grocery store. I'm like, not in my budget. But later I just want ice cream.
Totally. Can we talk flavor for a minute? Because I think that many people associate plant-based eating. I mean, hopefully not this community because they know what's up, but a lot of people do associate plant-based eating and healthier eating with bland food. And I noticed when I was reviewing your new book that you and I share a love of Better Than Bouillon, which I think is such a game changer for flavorful plant-based cooking. So I wanted to ask you what other flavor boosters you swear by to make your meals more flavorful.
Also, that's something that Better Than Bouillon is something that has a sticker shock thing experience when you see it. It's sometimes $6, sometimes it's $4, but when you see it, you're thinking, that's kind of expensive, but it has 38 servings. And if you think about that and do the math, it comes to be a value. It doesn't take up very much space in your pantry, and I just think it tastes so yummy. So try it out if you haven't. But I learned how to cook by checking out books at the library. I didn't have a lot of experience with flavors, and I really encourage people to play with their food. And in my books and in my recipes, I intentionally leave them a little bit simple because of the budget aspect. And I try to put in as many optional ingredients in case you have that budget, but also it allows you to play with your food. I even have the my tips section where people can write in how they changed my recipes. So if they are on the simpler side, what did you do to make those recipes good for your family? Did you add some lemon juice? Did you add a lot of hot sauce? How much hot sauce? And I really, really love when people just, you can, if you don't want to ruin your whole meal, just take a little bowl and play with that and see if you like those flavors. And it wasn't until I was really in it, like in the midst of cooking, that I learned how things pair together and had the confidence to find out what goes well for me. And I recipe test with 100 people. That's how many people test throughout my book. And I cannot tell you how everyone has a completely different palate. I can have the same recipe tested by 5 people, and someone's like, this has too much salt, and this person says this has not enough salt, or this is too spicy and there's no spice. And so like it really, really depends on what you're currently eating and what your palate is like. And so it's such a personal experience.
It is so personal. I love everything more salted than the average person, I think. And also, I feel like I'm whatever the opposite of a super taster is. I can't do a half a teaspoon of spice. There's like a tablespoon of spice. Like more is more in my book. And I know that not everyone is like that.
Yep, I hear that all the time. And that's how I ended up making salt to taste on everything, because I like salty. My husband doesn't eat it. So he tries not to eat oil or sugar or salt. And I am like, not that way. So, in our house, if someone else who's listening to this is maybe in a blended home where people eat differently, what I do is I make something that's really bland, and then separate it, and then continue seasoning my portion, and he can season his portion the way he wants. So the base is the same, we're eating the same thing, but how it tastes is going to be a little bit different because of the ways we prefer our food. And I hear that all the time with people who are non-vegetarian, where the base may be vegetarian, but then someone else can do with it what they want to do. And that's how they stay married. Because it can be a challenge when you don't eat the same as your partner.
It's true. That's such a helpful tip. And it could be really helpful for people with small kids too, that you make the base, you make it bland, you maybe make it without any salt, without any sugar. And then you can take the sort of small child portion out and then be like, okay, family portion. Like here's the cumin, here's the salt, here's all of the things.
Yes. I have a nephew, and I did not realize when I was cooking with him that little kids don't have the palate to take on any spice, really. And I don't remember what it was. It was something like a pinch of chili powder or something, but he started crying, and I felt so terrible because it was just too much for his little mouth. And so I love that tip personally too, that when I'm cooking for kids, I didn't even think about that.
And, it was funny because my first was like eats all of the things. They love spice, they love flavor, all of these things. My youngest does not. Like she's at the point where, black pepper is spicy. And so it's definitely challenged me as a cook, and the rest of my family is are omnivores, but I'm the cook. And so in our family, it's like, no, we eat vegan. And yeah, if you want to throw some grated cheese on something, but like the meals are vegan and that's exactly what they do. If they want to add something to it, that's what they do.
Yep. And that's how you have a harmonious family.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk a little bit about food waste because we alluded to only buying what you need at the grocery store and like not buying all the vegetables if you're not going to use them because you're going to throw them out. Because I think that's an overlooked part of managing our budget too. Especially with things like if you've ever had like kale like magically wilt, you bought it one day and the next day you're like, blah, it's gone. So I thought maybe we could do a rapid fire on how to better store and reduce waste for different foods, if you're up for it.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Avocados, because of course they're like never ripe and then somehow you miss them.
I love avocados so much. My husband actually proposed to me in an avocado. He hollowed out the pit, stuck a ring in there, and proposed to me at the farmer's market. So this is thank you for starting with this question. Thank you. I leave it on the counter when it's hard like a rock, and I check back on a daily basis, and it takes 1 second. And as soon as it starts to get a little bit darker and have a little bit of give, I toss it in the refrigerator, and that gives you so much time with it and prevents it from turning into mush, which I would still eat, but I know a lot of people wouldn't.
That's when we hide it in the smoothie here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I love that. Herbs, because they also break hearts.
They are not a one size fits all. With things like cilantro, I treat them like a bouquet of flowers. I cut off the bottom, I stick them in a cup of water, I put them in the refrigerator, and you can put a bag on it or not, but it'll extend by 4, 5, 6, 7 days. But with something like basil or spinach, I put them in an airtight container with some paper towels to absorb the moisture that would make them mushy and like soggy.
Yeah, that's perfect. Leafy greens, so similar but different. So something like kale or chard.
I treat those like I do the cilantro, but spinach, again, I would not treat in that same way.
Okay, nuts and seeds, because I feel like, particularly if you're trying to save money, like I go to a warehouse store and buy the 2 pounds of almonds. And I think a lot of people who do that just pop them on the shelf and maybe don't realize that that's the best way to take care of them.
Now I'm curious how you take care of yours, because
Ooh.
I'm maybe doing it wrong. I will say we do go through things pretty quickly, so they don't last for months on end. But I'm curious to hear your tip.
Well, I pop everything in the freezer.
Okay.
If I buy, because I do go through a lot. So if I buy a small bag, it just sits in my basket in my pantry. But when I buy the sort of like large warehouse 2 pounds, everything gets put in the freezer because then they could be in there for a year and they wouldn't go rancid. Like especially walnuts go rancid so easily. And then any of the seeds, so like chia seeds, ground flax, particularly ground flax, I always put in the freezer as soon as I open it.
We keep ours in our refrigerator, but I will definitely take you up on, or I will definitely do your tip, because I don't know if anyone else has had rancid seeds, but they are the worst. I had sunflower seeds, raw sunflower seeds, and I don't know, it didn't feel like they were in there very long, but in my pantry, but I ate them and it was not pleasant. So, okay, question for you.
Okay.
Do you have one freezer?
I have 2 very small freezers because I do have a basement fridge.
Okay.
So neither one of them is very big, but I do have 2.
Okay, because that was going to be my question, is how do you fit everything into your freezer if you only have one freezer? But that makes sense.
It's harder to buy 2-pound bags of everything. I have to admit that I'm very just like this old cheap fridge downstairs, but it's very much like the Costco fridge because I go to Costco once a month, and then
Yeah,
just like all the frozen fruit and the nuts, everything gets fired into there. And then I bring it up because my upstairs freezer just doesn't have the space.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to the rapid fire questions, I want to ask you one last question. Because if someone is really new to plant-based cooking and doesn't even know how to get started, they've listened to this and they're so inspired and they're so ready. What are a few good back pocket recipes that are easy enough even for the novice cook?
I personally lean on bean burritos. I do a whole grain wrap, like a whole wheat wrap, or tortilla, and you can toss in a can of beans, or if you froze your beans, throw those in. You can do some jarred salsa. You can put in half of an avocado, like slice it up, some of that rice that you may have batch cooked, and there you have a delicious meal that's under 5 minutes, came together really quickly. Pasta, your choice of pasta, whether you do chickpea or wheat or whatever kind, with a jar of marinara sauce, and you can do some frozen veggies. You can do some cannellini beans in there, or if you want to do some crumbled up tofu, it'll give you a ricotta feeling. And those are meals that are very familiar and don't require a lot of time or money to make, which is essential when you're getting started. You don't want to try too much too fast and then become overwhelmed.
Totally. We're not whipping aquafaba
No.
on day one.
I am still not whipping aquafaba.
Same. I went through a little phase and then I was like, this is not working out the way I wanted to. All right, let's switch to our rapid fire questions. As always, our guests don't know these questions ahead of time, but they're fun little softballs to help us get to know you better. So, you are from the sunny Central Valley in California. Do you prefer beach or mountains?
I prefer beach.
Love it. Me too. Well, depends. I do love them. I like being close. Vancouver, we're really spoiled because we have the mountains and the beach very close to each other, but if pressed, 100% beach. I hate being cold.
I was just gonna say I have to say, because I'm from Sacramento Valley, and our beaches nearby are cold. But I just spent time. My husband and I went for a very delayed honeymoon last week to a warm beach, and so I have warm beach on my mind, and that's the beach I choose.
Yeah, absolutely the beach I choose. Okay, you inspire so many people with your work. Who is the plant-based creator that inspires you?
Oh, I have really been loving Carly Bodrug from Plant You. Her content is really thoughtful, and I am always trying to waste less, and her scrappy cooking series is really smart. So I highly recommend anyone check her out.
I don't know how she does it because every time I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. Oh, that's
I
such a good
know.
idea.
How does her brain keep coming up with good ideas? I'm not sure, but it's really inspiring. And they're things that we use on a regular basis. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to save that and use it to do this thing.
I love it. When you don't feel like cooking, what do you eat?
Oh, when I don't feel like cooking, I eat. I've been eating a lot of those hummus pizzas. They're very simple, and I don't have to do any cooking. Actually, I guess I have to throw the crust in the oven for 5 minutes, but then I just top it with everything and am able to eat within 10 minutes.
Yeah, I love it. Hummus is magic. It just makes everything better.
It's so creamy and flavorful, and there are different types of hummus, and if you make your own, you can throw in all these different additions to change it up so you don't get tired of it.
I love it. Okay, last one. Your personality, if it were an animal, Or said another way, what is the animal that best describes your personality?
I was in a conversation recently with a bunch of friends, and we were talking about if your friend, if our group of friends was a dog, what kind of dog would he be? And I think they maybe said this to make me happy, but I love pit bulls. I feel like they're very loyal and loving, but also kind of stoic looking. And sometimes people think a certain way about them, but if you get to know them, they're really kind and caring. So, my group of friends said I am like a pit bull, which made my day, but also helped me realize that I have a serious face and I look to be more stoic than I am. But if you want to be my friend, I would be so happy and loyal and caring, and so I think a pit bull.
I love that. It was the most unexpected answer, and I
Thank
absolutely
you.
love it.
Thank you.
Toni Okamoto, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us on the Allsorts podcast. Everybody needs to run out either grabbing the book from your local bookshop or asking for it at the library. Plant-Based on a Budget, quick and easy. It is going to be so helpful and so useful and like change your plant-based life.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.